Hey YouTube, it's Brandon from VK Milling and Hardwoods here in what is today bright and sunny Southeast Tennessee. And oh man, it's been raining almost nonstop for 3 months now. It's been getting everybody sick. Everybody's got sinus infections and bronchitis and you name it. It's just ridiculous. And now we have the COVID-19 epidemic. And I just want to say a quick thing here. I hope you all are staying safe. Please take this seriously. A lot of people are getting sick, and it looks like the numbers are climbing far more rapidly now. So please, 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 if you're out there, take precautions, uh, sanitize the stuff that you bring home, wash your hands. Uh, and if you don't really have to go out, try not to go out. Um, I don't want to see or hear about viewers and everybody getting sick, and this is just a mess. It's an absolute mess, and I know that most of us have just never gone through anything like this, and it is just going to be brutal for all of us, especially given that we as humans are very social creatures. And you know yeah, it just, please be safe and take precautions. um, so yeah, all of that aside, I wanted to show you something I've been working on in the shop for the last week. um, Most of you who have sawmills, specifically bandsaw mills, know that you can only run a blade for so long before it needs to be sharpened, whether you hit something or not. um, the blades are just going to get dull. A lot of people, I dare say maybe most bandsaw mill owners, either box their blades up and ship them somewhere, like to Wood Miser or Jerry's Resharp, or maybe they know somebody locally that will resharpen those blades for them and then send them back. I know several guys that don't even bother with that. Blades are just disposable. And so they buy a box of blades, they use them up, they get another box of blades. That can get really expensive really fast. Um, I fall into the former category where I was boxing up blades and sending them off. Um, and I had some good results and I had some bad results. And, it is what it is. Some of them get sharpened great and some don't. But, like a lot of sawmill owners, can't necessarily afford to buy a dedicated sharpener and setter system. Um, I'm saving up for one, and I will have one eventually, but right now I don't. Um, and I could get by with just sending the box of blades in, but at roughly $7 a blade just for the sharpening service, um, a box going back is $70, 10 blades per box. But then you have to account for shipping in there. And I think in total with shipping and everything, it ends up being like $11, anywhere from 11 to $12 a blade, depending on who I send it to. And, that's a lot of money out of my pocket over the course of a month, especially here lately when I've just been going through blade after blade after blade after blade after blade, cutting all of this hardwood dunnage out here. Um, since it's been rainy and wet and business has virtually died because of all this mess that's going on. Um, we are considered an essential business. We do produce pallet material and dunnage for shipping and packing, things like that. Um, and that's all great and wonderful, but the the people that come to pick that stuff up and take it to the facilities, they're not working. And so all this dunnage and everything that I have stacked back here that it's already been paid for isn't going anywhere. So I can't get the next order of logs in or get new purchase orders in for this stuff and be out there cutting because it's just stacked and there's no room for anything. Um, so everything's just come to a grinding halt because the guys that are in the middle of the necessary and the necessary aren't doing what they need to do because of all this stuff. And so it sucks. So I've not really been cutting a lot this week. I only have a few logs left back there. I've done a lot of cleanup, trying to get things organized and ready to move that stuff out and get set up again. But I've been running out of blades. I've got 3 new blades sitting on the shelf, and everything else is dull. And I didn't want to have to deal with sending it off and getting blades back, and then hoping that those people are working. So I figured I can figure things out. So let's figure out how to sharpen our own blades. I looked at some YouTube videos of different guys that have different setups. This guy that has a radial arm saw with a CBN wheel on it that he uses. I don't have a radial arm saw here. Wish I did. They're great. There are guys that hand file, and I've tried that. Not a big fan of it. When I would be in a pinch and really, really needed blades, I would chuck a grinding stone that's for chainsaw sharpening into my angle grinder, clamp it to the bench, and then manually touch the blade to that grinding stone and sharpen that way. And don't get me wrong, it actually works, and it's pretty quick, but you have to be very diligent about what angle you're at when you touch the face of that tooth to that stone. And because you're holding the blade, it's got a lot of flop and wobble in it. And so it changes based, the angle and how you're holding it changes based on how much wiggle the blade has and all kinds of other stuff. And so, I'll figure this out. And so I did. And this is what I've got. I had this table sitting here in the shop. It was not really being used for anything. It was intended for a different project, and I ended up not doing it. So I started with the table, and this is what I've ended up with. It's an interesting little setup. So this is one of those El Cheapo, I think, Harbor Freight or, no-name Amazon sharpeners. I actually picked this up from the Restore for $5 in 2017. The label's still on there. And it originally started using it to sharpen chainsaw chains, but I really didn't like how it sharpened chainsaw chains. There was too much wiggle, too much slop. You'd hit the tooth in the wrong place constantly. And finding the exact right stone for the chains that I have was nearly impossible unless I ordered them online, but then the arbor size wouldn't match. It was weird. It was very, very weird. So, I ended up getting stones from Tractor Supply, which actually fit on here, but none of them would be the right size. So it just drove me nuts. So I just did not use it at all. But it works great for this. So I'll give you kind of an overview, and then I'll get the camera in here for some better details on what's going on. The grinder is mounted to a block of red oak back here, which has a hole drilled through it in the back with a carriage bolt and jam nuts with 2 metal plates on either side of it. And there is zero slop in it, none whatsoever. In fact, I had to actually jam nut the carriage bolt and then wrench it in. So it's actually threaded into this block and then secured. I drilled an oversized hole for a 3/8 inch all thread through this portion of the block straight down. It's got a T-nut in the bottom down here with a jam nut at the top. And so I can use this to adjust the angle of the grinder. It rests on this piece of metal down here. It's just a 1/4-inch piece of steel so that it doesn't wear down the MDF that this is all sitting on. I've got a piece of mahogany mounted here, and this piece of mahogany is for the depth gauge. So when I come down, it hits the same depth every single time on every single tooth. I basically destroyed the base and everything for this chainsaw sharpener when I was working all this out. All I did was cut it off and then mount that piece to this block with, there's technically 6 screws in here, 2 at the top and then 4 across the bottom. And that actually secures it against that wood block really nicely. So yeah, that's the essentials of it. What I've done here is I've got a right angle bracket, and I adjusted the sharpener to very specific angles using a digital angle finder, and then marked them on the block here so that this angle bracket will tell me what angle I'm at, and I can quickly adjust down to 4 degrees or up to 7 degrees or 9 or 10. The overwhelming majority of my blades are 7 degrees, but I do have some 4-degree Wood-Mizer blades, and I think I've got maybe half a dozen like 9 and 10-degree blades running around here from different companies that have sent me free blades to test out, that kind of stuff. So I'd like to sharpen them at the proper angle for that blade. So it's easily adjustable. I can just loosen this nut, twist this knob, get the angle that I want, tighten the nut down, and it stays put. The weight of this oak block, which is one of the reasons why I use such a beefy oak block, in combination with the motor, keeps everything pressed down against that steel block. It doesn't, if I lift it up like that, it drops right back down every single time. And it's not gonna bounce or move around or do anything like that. So that's that part of the setup. Out front here, I've got 2 strips of poplar that I drilled 3 holes in each, 1/2-inch holes, ran a mortise down through the middle of it, and then inserted bearings. When I replaced the bearings in my blade guide rollers on the sawmill, I replaced them just as they're going bad. And so that way I can take those bearings, I can chuck them in a box over here, and I can keep them as the just-in-case bearings. But I generally buy them 10 at a time from Fastenal. That way I have bunches of extras, new ones sitting here, and for 10 of them, it's less than the price for 2 from Wood-Mizer. So they work really well. I haven't actually had to swap them since I started running diesel instead of water, pine sol, and dish soap. So that's great. So I have a bunch of extras. So in here, we have bearings on both pieces. They're slightly offset from one another so that I can fit blades down in there nice and snugly. They move, but it holds them quite well. Out here, there's wobble, but where the grinding wheel comes down and contacts the blade, there are essentially 3 bearings that are holding that in place, and so it doesn't wiggle back and forth at all. The next part is the advancing arm. I guess that's what I would call it, the advancing arm. So I've got a piece of 1/4-inch flat bar there, hole in the bottom of it here. It is jam nutted on a piece of 1/4-20 that goes through here, which allows it to pivot. Up here, I've got a piece of 3/8 jam nutted all the way across. I made this arm. It's 2 parallel bars with a piece of brown bar at the end. Welded that in there, and then drilled these holes out so everything's kind of lined up nicely, and this is what advances the blade. I have another piece of this angle right here secured down to the board, and I scavenged on the chainsaw sharpener. There was a turn screw that was used to set the position of the tooth when you go to grind it. I actually scavenged that out of it, and I've used it here with a flange nut on the end and a second nut just to lock it into place. And I'm twisting it right now and screwing up my setup. So maybe I shouldn't do that. I didn't jam these back into place. I may have to tweak that in a minute. So the advancing arm comes down, it contacts that flange nut, it stops, so it's a positive stop, and then the motor comes down, kisses the front of that tooth, and then I move on to the next one. Now I'm at a debate with myself on this as to whether or not to bring this down, hold it in place, and then advance another tooth so that this acts as a drag grinder and hits the gullet and the back of the next tooth. Because this is on a spring, when I do that, I've tried it a few times, it tends to have a bounce as it goes up the tooth. And so I'm not sure if I really want to do that or not. Now I will say that doing that actually makes these teeth much, much sharper. But I'm not necessarily all that happy with the quality of the grind back there. So yeah, before I take the camera down and give you a better view of everything here, I'm going to run through this blade. This is a Ripper 37 at 7 degrees. This blade was used on the trip down to Alabama. It wasn't damaged by anything. But it was dull. This blade cut a lot of white oak and a lot of pecan. So it did get pretty friggin' dull. There's only one actual issue that I've come across so far with this iteration of the tool, and that is every blade manufacturer across the board, every single blade that I've tried, whether it's Monk 4s, these Ripper 37s, the Wood-Mizer blades, Linux blades, you name it, they all have the exact same issue. Due to the length of the blade, where the blade is welded together, the tooth spacing gets a little off. And on this blade, I measured it. The weld is back there somewhere. It's almost 1/8 of an inch off. So it should be a 7/8 of an inch tooth spacing here. But over there, it's much shorter. It's like 3/4 right at. And so there's a couple of teeth that don't get hit there when I'm going around because it throws off the sharpening or it throws off the settings. So I got to try to figure out how to account for that. But looking at all of the other sharpeners, whether they're $10,000 sharpeners or $1,000 sharpeners, they all, seems to me, would have that exact same issue. So there's got to be a way to account for it somehow. But, you know, I also think if there's maybe 3 teeth on here that aren't really perfectly sharp, then that's not going to be a big deal if the rest of the blade is still really sharp. Though, given that I have bearings in here, I could easily move a blade back. So what I might do is when I come across that, I might just bump the blade back into the grinding wheel just so I hit that face and then move on to the next one. So yeah, I'm going to get this one started here. I like to mark the tooth that I start with. Usually I start with the weld, the tooth immediately after the weld, and then that just gives me an indicator as to, you know, when I'm done. But in this instance, I'm actually just going to mark that tooth. That's not the one I started with. That's not the one that's here. So I'm going to mark this one. and that'll just tell me when I'm done. So I'm going to get this dialed in, make sure that I didn't screw up my settings here, and then I'll run this blade and see how well it does. Move that back. It should just kiss there. There we go. That one goes there, and this back in a little bit. Okay, too much. Bring it back just a little bit more. Line that out. Just about right. There we go. That should do it. Perfect. All right, let's run this sucker and see what happens. This is the weld space. This is, I'm not sure exactly how to deal with this, other than I can back it up. Just like that. A little bit better. Hold on. Well, I was trying to do this in one take, but customer knocked on the door. As I was saying, this is the weld area right here. So the tooth spacing is slightly off. So it looks like what I'll end up doing is I just move the blade or the handle back, touch that tooth, and then advance to the next one. Touch it lightly, and then move on to the next one. back to where we started. Yeah, boy, that sucker is sharp. I like it a lot. So ideally with this, one of the reasons why on a lot of these teeth you might hear it touch the blade, but you don't see any sparks or anything like that, is that ideally you want it set up so that your grinding rock essentially just barely touches that tooth. What you don't want to do is have a heavy grind. If you have a heavy grind, what ends up happening is in a setup like this where you don't have an oil bath for the blade, you'll overheat the tip, and you don't want to do that. If you overheat the tip, it loses its temper. That blade is not going to stay sharp. As soon as you start cutting with it, it'll get dull just like that. And you don't want to run the risk of grinding that tooth off or rounding that tooth over or modifying the hook angle that much. If the hook angle, let's say this is a 7-degree blade, if the hook angle is off a half a degree in either direction, I don't care. It's still going to cut like a 7-degree blade. But if the hook angle is like this and I come down, at like a 5-degree angle or something, I'm actually going to hit the top of that tooth, come down and not touch the rest of it at all. Now, that being said, the only part of the blade that actually cuts the wood is that first like 100,000ths of an inch on the tooth. That very, very tip, that's what cuts. The rest of the blade, or the rest of that tooth profile, is really just there for removing material and getting it out of the way. But that tip is what actually makes the cut as it goes through the wood. So as long as that tip is super sharp, the rest of it doesn't really matter all that much. That said, a drag grinder or a CBN wheel grinder are going to be better than what this setup is because it'll grind out the gullet. That's important because the gullet develops microfractures in the blade. And if you don't grind those out on each pass, then those microfractures will open up more and more and more, and then your blade breaks. What I was doing was chucking the stone in the angle grinder, cleaning the gullet out, hitting the back of the tooth, and then once that's done, throw it on here, and then grind the face of the tooth. I don't know if I'm going to go that route or not. I might just use this and clean that gullet as best I can and get the back of the tooth. Or there might be some other things that I end up doing. I'm not really sure yet. But we'll see. With these, I think the best course of action is really to go around twice to try to make sure that you hit all the teeth, because there will be gunk that builds up on the front of that tooth sometimes. And if that gunk is on there when this bar hits it, then it might throw off the spacing, meaning that the tooth that's out here actually gets pushed just a hair further so it doesn't get hit. But as it goes through here, the grinding stone can clean that gunk off the face of that tooth so that when you go around the second time, everything should be exactly where it's supposed to be, and you hit it, boom, 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 boom. But as you can see, I think I'm going to try to do this uninterrupted, and then we'll time it and see just how long it actually takes for me to go around one time with this blade. This is the tooth I started at. It's still marked black. I'm going to start the grinder. I'm going to look at the timer up here, and then we'll go from there. So, 7 minutes. Done. That took 2 minutes and 45 seconds to go around the entire blade, including stopping and having to back up 4 or 5 teeth into the grinding stone because of the weld area. And yeah, good grief, man, this blade is sharp. Will it stay sharp? I don't know. I haven't tried one of these blades since I built this. I have used blades in the past that I used the angle grinder to do, and they cut just fine, as long as I didn't try to go too fast and accidentally bump a tooth and take the tip of it off. But yeah, so this works fine. The next project is I've got some parts on order. I'm going to make a tooth setter. This is not permanently mounted to this table. The reason for that is that I want to be able to throw a bunch of blades on this grinder, grind them all out, get 10, 15, 20 blades stacked up, and then take the grinder off, set it down underneath, put the tooth setter up here, throw those blades on and start setting teeth, and then batch them out like that. So the tooth setter will sit right here, trying to conserve the space. This will go underneath, and the tooth setter will come up, and the tooth setter will come off, this will come up, you name it. I've got about 85 more blades to sharpen, probably 100. I got 4 boxes of 10, about 15 over there, so 40, 55 there. I've got about 30 right there. So it's about 85 plus laying in the floor. I've got another 20 or so blades. So that's about 105. Yeah, I got a lot of sharpening to do. And I do think that I want to tweak this just a hair so it takes just a tiny bit more off of the tooth. I noticed on some of them that it wasn't quite hitting it. It was really, really close. You could hear it touch, but it wasn't quite there. As far as shaping the grinding wheel, which you have to do, it also, this cleans it up, but it's just like aluminum oxide, whatever, stone that came out of my Dremel kit that you're supposed to use for cleaning and shaping the grinding stones that come in that kit. And I pulled that out, and that's what I use for shaping this. I'll show you that real quick. These blades get really dirty. The gunk from the blade builds up on the grinding stones. The pores fill. They get filled with metal, grease, and gunk that comes off the blade. So you do need to clean them. Just turn it on. Use one of these little stones. Get down in there. Clean that off a little bit. And then shake the piece up some. And it's done. Voila! That's it. So I hope you enjoyed this. I'll get you some better views of everything that's in here. So I will say that I'm not going to build any plans or anything like that for this. I'm absolutely certain that there are probably patent issues of different mechanisms and what have you that are in here that might get me sued by saw or sharpening system manufacturers. So I'm not going to do any plans or anything like that. If you want to build one yourself, at least you'll see what's here and you can kind of figure it out. But yeah, so let's get you a view of it, and then we'll be done. All right, here are my guide rails. These are about 12 inches long. And down here you can see the bearing. So that holds that really tight. As you can see, that there is no wiggle there at all. This is the stopper system. You can see the handle comes up, grabs the tooth, pushes it forward, hits the stopper, acts as a positive stop, and yeah, it works great. This is the handle mechanism and how it pivots. In here is how everything is attached. Steel plate. Over here you can see 2 plates, holes drilled in them, 1/4 bolt through the block of wood. And then of course the mahogany stopper for the depth stop right here. And so when this sucker comes down, it stops. It doesn't grind into the blade itself. On this side, I'll bring it down so that you can see a good bird's eye view here. So it comes down, hits just ever so lightly. See? You don't want to take a bunch off. Actually, let's advance that properly so that way it's not... boom. See? It just kisses the front of that tooth and no more, because that's all we really want. All right. So we'll see you on the next one. Have fun, stay safe, and keep watching.